Good evening, everyone. My name is Rhian. I'm one of the research practitioners in the Children's Research Team, and I'm the study coordinator for the ATTEST study. As Helen has mentioned, the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020 provided many extra challenges for us as a team and for the children and their families. At the time, there wasn't much information about this new virus. There were lots of changes going on both inside and outside of the hospital, and both staff and the public were apprehensive about what was to come. We had to make the decision about whether it was in the best interest of the children to continue their treatment, as we had to weigh up the risks of bringing children that were identified as shielded into the hospital. From a research perspective, many studies had to be paused, as research members were needed to support vital COVID research, as well as being redeployed to support clinically and on the wards. Luckily, due to the importance of the study treatment, and after weighing up the risks and taking on board the opinions of staff and parents, we had the permission to continue to deliver the ATTEST study. However, the way that we were doing this was going to have to change. Firstly, we needed to find a new space to carry out the patient visits. We had previously been using the dialysis unit on the at the Children's Hospital on a Sunday, but this was no longer an option. Luckily, we were able to secure the use of the biomedical research unit, a dedicated research space that was usually used to deliver adult research studies. This was regarded as a relatively low risk area, away from any COVID positive patients being treated in the hospital. We had to move the large red cell loader machines, as well as things like fridges, room temperature cabinets, and other equipment to ensure that the space was adequate to be able to provide the study treatment. There were staffing issues due to some staff now having other clinical commitments, as well as staff absences due to sickness and having to isolate. Extra training was required for new staff, which all took time. There were also big changes for the children and their families due to new COVID precautions. The children could no longer attend for their visits with the rest of their family, as children could only be accompanied by one parent. This caused a lot of issues for many of the children, as having younger siblings or only one parent that was comfortable with driving the long journey to Nottingham provided many things that had to be considered by all families. This was further complicated by the families not being able to stay overnight in the hotels prior or after to a study visit. This meant an 8-hour journey for some families, with lots of waiting around in the hospital car park for parents and siblings, as local facilities were closed due to the national lockdown. Scheduling became difficult as some children missed visits due to households having to isolate or due to children themselves testing positive for COVID. Luckily, due to the willingness of the families and the wider teams, we only had to cancel one visit completely, which was in the March of 2020. Moving all children onto the open label study was further delayed due to COVID, but when we successfully moved our first 3 children over in the middle of the pandemic, it seemed like an even bigger achievement. All children successfully moved over to the open label study between August and October 2020. From this point on, all children were receiving a high dose of the study medication. This is what a typical visit would look like for children now on the open label study. The children attend the hospital in 2 groups. This is currently one group of 5 and one group of 4 children. These visits typically take place every 2 weeks on a Sunday, so each child attends for their treatment once per month. During the visit, information is collected about the child's general health, and any details of new medications or illnesses are recorded. Vital signs are taken and heights and weights are recorded by the research nurses. Routine bloods are taken from the child, as well as a 50 ml sample of blood used in the Eridex system via the child's portacath or following cannulation by the study doctor. The Eridex system then uses a specialised procedure to place the study drug into the child's red blood cells using the red cell loader machines. The machine is pictured there in the slide. Once the study drug is inside the child's red blood cells, it is given back to them via an infusion. A sample of the child's pre-infusion blood and a sample of the contents of the infusion bag is collected and cultured in the lab to check for any contamination. A sample of the infusion bag is also collected for analysis of the dexamethasone sodium phosphate concentration, so that the actual dose administered to the child can be determined. Once the child has had their infusion, they are examined by the study doctor, and additional vital signs are taken to ensure they are fit and well for their journey home. The mental well-being of the child is also assessed at every visit. A typical visit takes about 3 to 4 hours per child, but it can be longer depending on how the day is going. The children arrive staggered throughout the Sunday morning. Every 6 months, the patients also have a DEXA scan to look at their bone density and a neurological examination by the doctor. Children complete a quality of life questionnaire and an assessment called an ICARS, which assesses things like a child's coordination, speaking and walking ability, which Dr. Whitehouse spoke about earlier. All of the information collected at each visit and any subsequent test results are sent to the study sponsor Eridau. We will now hear from 3 of our patients and their parents who will share their experience of being part of the ATTEST study.
Rose had talipes in her feet, and when we finished that treatment, there was still kind of something not quite right. So we were referred to genetics, and that's how we got diagnosed. It's the cough, first of all, was the biggest symptom. And that we keep that at bay with prophylactic antibiotics. And then it was just general, we were concerned about Rose not being able to run was the biggest thing when she was little. And we thought that was down to her talipes initially, but after a few tests, it was AT. So straight away after our diagnosis, we were put into one of the clinics where we see everybody, and it was one of the first things we were approached on. Would we be interested in taking part in a drug trial? And initially we were like, gosh, that's a bit scary, but actually once we had all the information, we were like, let's give it a go.
What was it that kind of changed your mind? What did you...
I think lovely people explaining it to us, knowing all the information. Here in the hospital, all the different multidisciplinary team members specialise in AT. So we see neurology, immunology, dietitian, speech and language, respiratory, all those different people.
He developed a little shaking in the neck, and then he was sort of slowly deteriorating in terms of health. It was like when the kid started walking at the age of 1.5. So he's was like he was a little wobbly. He was like so we just concerned. We thought of it's just like sort of a early sort of a development in terms of he's just going to get stable slowly. But when we see that he's not getting stable properly, we actually had some sort of a doctor's diagnostic, and he was diagnosed quite early by a GP. Maybe he had some information on the AT, and then he said this is what he feels like, and then he had some tests and all, and then finally he was diagnosed. We actually been referred by the GP to the Nottingham AT hospital, and then finally when the Queen's Hospital started this trial, they asked us to sort of a volunteer for the trial, and then we actually opted in, and then this is how it started. The team is really good. They actually are taking care of good care of Muhammad Rhian, and then he's happy coming in here. This has no problem, and it's over the weekend, so it's absolutely no problem for us to coming in, and then it's like sort of a drive out plus some sort of a medical help. It's perfectly all right. I definitely recommend for other parents to get into this. Yeah. So this is one of the benefits which I believe we got in living in this country, that the medical research is so advanced that this sort of trials are there, and then people get into that, and then they actually get some sort of a benefit. Medical is a very vast field, and the research is always there. When then some sort of a medicine is there and then research is required, I believe the people who actually are suffering, they should volunteer in it, just to get some sort of a benefit out of it, and then present, if it is a successful medicine, it just sort of an example to other people, or other people who actually are suffering from the same sort of a disease. So you definitely need to volunteer.
So I think what we noticed first of all was that once Rhian had learned to walk, that he did kind of stabilise beyond kind of tottering and staggering, and he was about probably 2.5, and we kind of thought maybe it's time to get this checked out now. So that was when we initially started to look into things. And to begin with, they suspected that Rhian was hypermobile. We had an MRI scan, that was all clear, and they said that perhaps it was just a case of having some physio. But it just didn't quite sit right with us, and we felt perhaps it needed a little further investigation. So I did some research at home, and I actually came across the AT website, which described a lot of the symptoms we were seeing in Rhian. So I requested a test from my GP, who said that she felt, although it was unlikely, that she was willing to put him forward for that test. And yes, and then he was diagnosed at about 2.5. We came to Nottingham once we had the diagnosis. We were put in touch with Nottingham. He came up for his first clinic there.
I was 6.
You were 6 when you started the trial. So
Yeah.
when we first started coming to Nottingham, there was talk then about the trial being a possibility, and we were very fortunate in that Rhian was just 6 when we were able to get him a place on the trial. So he was really at the starting end of things in terms of his age. So
Now I'm
yes,
8.
he's 8 now. Yes, he's 8 now.
Do you know what a trial is? Do you know what it means?
It's when you put the master sword back in the stone until the breath of the wild, I think.
No, not in the video game. What's this trial for?
Oh,
What are we doing?
I'm having a kangaroo.
Yes, but do you know why you're having the medicine?
No.
Right.
He does. I mean, we have discussed it.
I just said it.
I mean, our experience in terms of the care we've received during the trial has been absolutely consistently fantastic. Rhian's developed such an amazing rapport with all of the staff. We've been treated as a family with utmost care and sensitivity at all times. It's really been wonderful. They feel like an extended family to us now, and we actually have come to quite look forward to the visits, which is amazing considering the level of needle phobia that Rhian's experienced from the start. But he's gradually, with play therapy, he's got better and better, and the visits have become quicker and quicker for him because he's been able to because he's been able to, you know, cope with that in a very safe environment. So it's been really good for him, I think. We come up every month, so yeah, we haven't missed any. We've been fortunate enough to be able to continue coming throughout COVID. We come from Hastings, so it's a 4-hour journey either way. Ordinarily, we stay overnight in a hotel and then come the following morning. During COVID, we were unable to do that because there were no hotels, so we were doing it all in one day. I mean, it wasn't an easy decision for us to make because particularly when you're dealing with a young child, it's not a decision you're making for yourself, it's a decision you're making for somebody else. But I really do believe that if it is right for you and you can, you're in a mental place where you can cope with that, I think it's just fantastic. And can you sit down?
Why?
Because it's not safe to stand. I think it's just, it's brilliant because, as we do say to Win, whether or not he hears it, he is paving the way for so many other children who may not, for whatever reason, be able to have the opportunity.